Hey everyone, welcome back. We are here in Marketing 457 to talk about Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is where we get into actual survey design. So we spent the last two chapters talking about scaling, what types of scales to use, what types of options should consumers have when responding to questions in your survey. So now we're going to talk about the questions themselves, how to format a questionnaire, the order that we might want to put questions in, and so on and so forth. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to start here with just defining very quickly what is a questionnaire. A questionnaire is simply a formalized set of questions that you will use to obtain information from your respondents. With a survey and our descriptive research, we're going to use these same questions for all respondents every single time. We will talk about scenarios in which you might have different branches. If someone says yes to a question, then they might have one set of questions, or no, they might have a different set of questions. Or perhaps you have male respondents answer one set of questions and female respondents answer one set of questions, or there might be some other criteria that you have. But generally speaking, this is going to be a standardized set of questions for respondents to answer. We are trying to translate our goals of the overarching market research problem into survey form. We need to make sure that the data we're collecting actually relates to and ties back to the questions that we're trying to answer for the client. We also want to make sure that the questions that we ask are asked in a way that elicits responses from the actual respondents. They're both willing to give and that they're giving accurate and truthful information. We also need respondents to not just participate, be willing to answer questions. We also need them to actually complete this entire survey, because without a complete response, then we may not be able to use that data at all. So let's look at a couple of examples of how research companies have utilized different types of questions and formatted their questionnaires in ways that help respondents get through it, provide correct information, or be willing to provide the information and complete the survey. So here's an example of a market research firm in Connecticut. They conduct a survey of children every quarter. So every quarter, they interview about 150 boys and girls between the ages of 6 and 8, as well as 150 boys and girls ages 9 to 12. They use mall intercepts to do this. We're going to talk more about this later, but the mall intercept, as I think I've mentioned in a previous video, is someone actually goes and stands in a mall and says, "Excuse me, can I have a minute of your time?" Perhaps targeting a specific group of people, watching for children walking by and asking their parents if they can participate. So that's how they find those 150 or 300 total children between the ages of 6 and 12 for this survey. They're looking for information on a variety of topics related to children and youth, things like snack foods they like, what television shows do they like, what slang words are they using, and things like that. Now, the company has been very strategic in the way they do this questionnaire. The first thing they do is they make sure that it will take no more than 8 minutes to complete the entire survey, because they know that children have a lower attention span than adults. Even with that said, when we are eliciting responses from adult respondents, we also want to keep the questionnaire relatively brief. If we can get the information we need in 6 questions instead of 26 questions, certainly we want to do that. The shorter the questionnaire, the more likely it is that children or adults will actually complete the entire survey. We want to make it simple for them. The software that exists today will even give you an estimate a lot of times of how long it's going to take to answer the questions that you've put in the questionnaire. Okay, adult attention spans are a little bit longer than children's, of course, but adults also don't want to be spending 30, 40 minutes answering questions on a survey. Another thing that this company does when asking questions to children is that they they really try to be specific about the context, what they're referring to. So instead of saying, hey, 6-year-old, tell me about your radio listening habits. I don't know how many 6-year-olds you know, but most 6-year-olds would not give the kind of information that the researcher is actually looking for. They might be able to sing the jingle from the radio station that they usually listen to. They might be able to say that they do listen to the radio, maybe name a few songs, but not, they're still not going to be giving the type of information that you're looking for. For all I know, my 5-year-old, if he was asked this question, he would probably tell you that he has radios in his imaginary world and go on some elaborate narrative about his imaginary worlds that he makes up in his head. So researchers, especially when dealing with children, have to be very specific and particular about not just what they're asking, but the very specific wording of how they're asking it. So instead of saying, what are your radio listening habits? They might say, what about when you're in your mom's car? What do you listen to the radio? And then, we might ask, what songs do you listen to? Or there might be something a little bit more specific than that, but you can't really ask how many minutes you spend, how often, how many days a week, or anything like that to children. So we have to be very particular about how we ask things, especially based on the population that we're trying to get data from. So the questionnaire design process is here. It's relatively long in terms of the number of steps here. We are going to work through most of these and focus a lot on this question structure, wording, order, and layout. The first thing we need to do is specify the information needed. We need to figure out what data we actually need to collect in order to answer or resolve or find some solutions to the problem that our client or that our firm is facing. This is going to be based on the problem statement that was already developed earlier in the market research process. So for you all in your group project, you're going to look at your problem statement and your components to the problem statement and use that and perhaps some exploratory research that maybe was conducted to help you better understand the problem. And then you're going to use all of that to help figure out what information you actually need to get out of your survey. We're going to look at what type of interviewing or surveying methods. So we have a variety of different methods. One would be a mail questionnaire. So we would actually send a questionnaire in the mail. If we do that, we always send a return envelope that is already stamped and already addressed so that the participant, the only thing they have to do is fill it out, put it in the envelope, and drop it in the box. If we're going to ask them to pay for a stamp, they're not going to return it. If they have to go find their own envelope, they're not going to return it. Okay. So this is a paper survey that goes in the mail. You can have a variety of questions. In this case, they're looking in our example back to our department store that we've looked at a couple of times, looking at rank orders, an example of a question that you could use here easily. A telephone questionnaire is exactly what it sounds like. You are going to call on the telephone. This may be random digit dialing. I will note that there are very few landlines left relative to cell phone lines, but they do still exist. And with landline telephones, there is this do not call list. So it used to be that telemarketers would call, especially around dinner time, to random landline phones or different lists that they had. And then you would have to hang up on them in the middle of dinner, and it was super annoying. So the government encouraged this do not call list. So it's a list that someone can call and register their phone number on that says, I don't want to be contacted by telemarketers. And so telemarketers do have to abide by that. With that said, market research is an exception to that rule. So it is legal and possible to use calling lists, maybe a purchase list or other calling lists, the telephone book and randomly call people, or other ways to select participants for telephone interviews. So you can see in this example how they're still looking at the preferences between and among stores, but unlike the mail questionnaire where they could very easily rank 10 department stores, that would be much more difficult on the telephone. Trying to get someone, tell them all 10 stores, and then have them rank all 10, remember what they are, keep them in order in their heads. That's going to be very difficult. So you can see how the questionnaire design is going to be different with a telephone interview or a telephone survey than it would be for our mail survey. Then we have a personal questionnaire. So this is going to be an actual face-to-face interview or interaction. In this case, in our example, they are actually giving the participant 10 different cards, maybe business card size cards, and asking them to put them in order of preference. So this is essentially the same activity that is going on in the mailing questionnaire, but it's a little bit more, can be a little bit more interactive when it's face to face. This could be like a mall intercept survey, going door to door, stopping people who are walking into a football game, or stopping people who are walking down Main Street and asking for a few minutes of their time. And then we have electronic and mobile questionnaires. So this is going to actually be very similar to the questionnaires that we mail through the US Postal Service. We're still going to have be able to use rank orders. We can also use Likert scales, differential semantic scales. There are a ton of options with electronic surveys that we can use a lot of different types of questions. One thing that can be unique about this is that we can actually visually not just display pictures, but we can produce or incorporate videos and other stimuli that we wouldn't be able to incorporate into some of these other methods.